That'd be amazing. Electric bell. Or we could like connect the wire into the cross and I could just hit the cross and it's like you hear the bell outside dinging as the cross moves. Or like maybe just instead of like just pull it down, like you pull it down and it like it's one of those like poop and it pops back up and that's when the bell starts ringing. Just sits right there. See? No swinging crosses then. Bad ideas with Thomas this morning. So there you go. Yes, sharing bad ideas with Thomas this morning. So good morning, everybody. Apparently, don't look at my face. I'm squinty-eyed this morning. I was at a church like for 3 days down in Charleston. Allergies are hitting, and I'm just all apparently very squinty-eyed. I feel it. It's just the way things are this morning. But we're in Genesis. We're going to be in Genesis 11 through 21 today. So just kidding. So, yeah, I know. The last 2 Sundays, I've preached 3 chapters each Sunday. So, but this Sunday, it's just Genesis 11. We're focusing in on Tower of the Babel. So how many of you are Marvel fans? You watch the Marvel movies and series? There's, okay, 3 people. Great. Okay, so if you've heard, there was one of the Marvel TV series, Loki. If you haven't had a chance to watch that, it's one of the better ones. And I got to watch it, actually. It was December. I think it was right after Christmas. My brother-in-law's gift to us was a stomach virus, and we got trapped at my mother-in-law's into the new year. And so aside from having to deal with the disease, I needed something to do while I was quarantined, and Loki was it. I watched there's 2 seasons, watched them all back to back, because what else am I going to do? I was sitting there waiting on my kids to get where we can travel. And so I got to see the series in its totality. And what's interesting is the whole concept of this one character, and if you know that's based on Loki, the Norse god, and he wants to basically rule the universe. So it's this idea of a noble purpose, and in the TV series, that phrase is utilized regularly, that Loki is trying to fulfill his noble purpose. And he says that, and he sees it particularly one way. And he has kind of a misplaced and a misconcept of nobility. The whole idea that the virtue of nobility is the idea that you have a large vision, you have something that you are seeking, that noble purpose, that large, it's going to take a while, it's risky, but it's worth the struggle for what you're going for. And so in the show, this is in a big way about Loki's noble purpose, but it's what he calls it, even though he goes about it. If you watch the movies, you know that he's the villain many times, and he's going about this the wrong way. And he wants to bring order, but all the wrong way. It's all messed up. And he just has this sense, I have to go out and kind of save the universe. And so in our own real world, I think of sometimes, the way that Loki's trying to make his name great. We have in our own world the opportunity to do that. And we find this through these social media influencers. That particularly among children, you ask them what do they want to be when they grow up, and many of them say they want to be social media influencers. In other words, they want to be the kind of people. And if you're thinking, maybe the older generation, what's a social media influencer? It's a person who so many thousands, if not tens, if not hundreds of thousands of people are watching on a regular basis, that they're influencing and shaping the thoughts of people in the culture. And you think, well, who are these people? Whoever has a platform and whoever gets the audience. And again, it doesn't mean that you have to do something well. It doesn't mean that you actually have a genuine contribution. You just have to be somehow interesting enough that you have this influence. And there is a sense that these social media influencers are shaping because they have some sort of, many times, skewed sense of noble purpose. I want to basically exert my thoughts upon society, whether or not they're good, bad, or wrong. And this was in many ways what we see, like, again, in the movies. And it really just becomes about, with the social media influencers, it's just about themselves. It's just about, these are my thoughts, and they should shape your life, which is rather arrogant. Or when we have our startup businesses, we're going to create these businesses, and it's all about our brand, and we're going to make our name great, and we're going to do things our ways. And so much of our culture is the look at me, look at what I'm doing, and we should make the world, almost shape the world in our own image. Well, this is the idea that we get as we come to Genesis 11 with the Tower of Babel. That in the story, if you've been hanging out the last 2 Sundays, we've moved all the way from Earth 1.0, which was before the flood, and everything was going crazy and was insane, and God told people to do things, and they said, nope, not going to do that. Okay? Which is basically the theological way of putting it. I'm sure it's like a Hebrew word, except instead of, you got like with Hebrew, you got to get that in the back of the throat. So God says, this is not good. I created the world to be good. People have messed it up. So he sends the flood, cleanses the world, saves one family, Noah, his family, his sons, his daughter-in-laws, takes them through the flood. They come out, they're in Earth 2.0. Everything's supposed to be great, but first thing Noah does is plant a vineyard, get passed out drunk. His youngest, Ham, takes advantage of the situation in some way, gets cursed, and now we're all just kind of like, what's going to happen next? Chapter 11. Now, and the whole earth had one language and the same words, which obviously would. This is one family. I mean, they've been hanging out, they've got one language. But if you read and you pay attention, the whole earth had one language and the same words, which, I mean, you would think to yourself, like, that's what you would have if you have the same language. You have the same words. It's a weird phrasing in the text. It's not just that simply that they had the same words. It's that they have one language, and they're all of the same mindset, is the idea that's being presented here. Okay? Verse 2. And as people migrated from the east, they found a plain in the land of Shinar and settled there. And they said to one another, come, let us make bricks and burn them thoroughly. And they had bricks for stone and bitumen for mortar, tar. And they said, come, let us build ourselves a city and a tower with its top in the heavens. And let us make a name for ourselves, lest we be dispersed over the face of the whole earth. Now, after they came out from the flood, God said, look, the same standing order applies. Be fruitful, make babies, and spread out. And they basically said, we're going to build our own city and we're going to make our name great. So, verse 5. And the Lord came down to see the city and the tower which the children of man had built. And the Lord said, behold, they are one people and they have all one language. And this is only the beginning of what they will do. And nothing they propose to do will now be impossible for them. Come, let us go down and there confuse their language, so that they may not understand one another's speech. So the Lord dispersed them from there over the face of all the earth, and they left off building the city. Therefore its name was called Babel, because there the Lord confused the language of all the earth, and from there the Lord dispersed them over the face of the earth. So as we look at this, and we're going to look at the rest here in a minute, because there's a connection. One of the advantages of reading across Genesis the way we do is we tend to break up the passages too much and we don't understand the larger picture of what God's doing. And that's why we backed up. That's why we look and understand we're in Earth 2.0. There's a purpose. God has again, brought them in, and he's wanting them to go out. He's given the command, and they have a mindset. And rather than going out, they have a plain, they have a big area, and they're going to build a city. So rather than using, using the stones that are hewn from the rock the way they would normally do, like when we were reading about the altars before, they would use these stones. Now they're making bricks. So This is where, again, as you think of the literature, it was Tolkien and Lord of the Rings would often paint the industrialization in a negative light, the sense of factory. And that's what bricks are. They're manufactured, you can mass produce them, and the way they put them together, they're not using just normal mortar, they're using tar. They're using specifically a substance that was designed for all purposes to be waterproof. Do you understand what's going on? In making this city with these bricks, you got to remember, Noah was long-lived. Noah's still alive at this point. Okay, Shem, Ham, Japheth, they're all alive. So the people, as they're multiplying, they remember great-grandpappy Noah's stories about the ark. They remember and they can see that every time there's a thunderstorm, Uncle Japheth starts twitching because of what went down with the ark. And they remember that the Lord sent a flood, and even though he puts his bow in the sky, hangs his war bow up to say, I will not do this again, they are building purposefully a waterproof tower to thumb their nose at God. And it says that they want to make their name great. See, we're bad with our Hebrew. We might be a little rusty with our Hebrew. We go back to Noah. Noah has 3 sons. And Noah, again, when we looked at Noah, Shem is given the greatest blessing. Blessed be the God of Shem. May he prosper, and may his brother Ham and Canaan serve him. Blessed be Japheth, who will dwell in the tents of Shem, because Shem will be the greatest, and Canaan will be his servants. And of course, we know Shem. I've told you that this is where we get the word Semitic from. Okay, the people of the Semitic, the sons of Shem. The name Shem means name. So when they say, let us make a name for ourselves, let us make a Shem for ourselves, let us make our own glory. This passage here is a total usurping of God's plan, and they are like fresh on this ark. Like the land, I mean, I don't know how much devastation, how long it would last it when you see, like, when there's a natural disaster and you can still see some of the things that have gone on from that disaster. I mean, it's pretty cataclysmic. So imagine this kind of went on for generations. But God is the one who took Shem and said, look, I'm going to make a great people here. No, they're like, we're going to make a name for ourselves, and they're going to make this city, they're going to build it up such that it touches heaven. And this is what we also miss, because when we read this passage, and Ramona was just talking about the omniscience, the omnipresence, the power of God and how great he is, right? God does not have to travel anywhere. God does not have to, like us, move from here to there, okay? There's no place that God's hand is not on. So when this passage says, the Lord says, let us go down and see this tower, it's actually a backhanded insult, because they're trying to build this tower to heaven. Their goal is to reach heaven, but as much as they work on it, as much as they do, the picture, not that God has to travel, the picture is that God has to stoop down and travel down to see this puny tower that they're making. It's an insult of the craftsmanship of what's going on. Their goal was to reach heaven, but yet God must still, in this sense, the picture is go down and look. And this is how pathetic their efforts are. And this is why when we think about, like in our own culture, and we think about how when we try to make our name and we think much about ourselves, how ultimately there's just no other word. This picture is a pathetic act of rebellion on the part of the people. And so this is why even when it says, and we look at this, and he's going to confuse their speech because, and the language is, well, they'll do anything that they want to if they put their mind to it. Understand when we read this, this is not God being scared. This is not God like, oh, I have a rival. This is a part of that backhanded of, because they're trying to make a tower to heaven and they stink at it, okay? Like this is an awful effort. So the whole point is, like, these guys are going to just keep running amok. I've got to do something to help them out. I've got to break them up because it's just going to keep getting worse. They're going to feed off each other. You ever do that when you got like kids that are like feeding off of each other and causing chaos? What do? You take them, you separate them, right? Okay, you've got to separate the problems, and that's what God is doing. They've all come together, they're all rebelling, and he wants them to disperse, so he helps them out. It's basically like the gift of tongues, but permanent, and you forgot the one that you originally had. That's what it is. I mean, that's what this is, right? I mean, they get a brand new language, because they only have one language. So now all of a sudden you've got all these languages, and they forgot their original language. So it's like the worst case scenario of the gift of tongues, because you now no longer have your original language. And because of that, they're able to disperse, and they go out because, again, now they can't talk to each other. What are they going to do? And so this whole incident at Babel is stalling. It's trying to steal God's glory. It is a complete failure of noble purpose. God has made human beings in his own image. And I think we forget how precious that is. This is the very reason why this morning I did not successfully kill the squirrel, but a squirrel tried to, become familiar with my truck. And I watched it, and again, it's one of those things where if I run over a squirrel, I don't feel that bad. I mean, it's a squirrel, it's a rodent. I know some people, that's heartless, it's just such a little squirrel. I was like, there's more. And they're animals. Okay, when we go hunting, we kill the deer. The deer, that's a much bigger animal. We might feel, our heart goes out, Bambi. But Bambi's tasty, so we have motivations. Animals, as cool as they are, as magnificent as they can be with the large animals, they're just animals. They are not made in the image of God. They are not like us. We, by virtue of being made in God's image, no matter how small we might feel, no matter how broken our bodies might be, that we bear the stamp, the seal, the image, the reflection of God in his nature. And so we have a noble purpose. God made us with that in the garden. He's like, look, we're the pinnacle of creation. We already have it. And so here, what's really going on with Babel, the first thing that we see that people do is they try to replace the purpose that God has given them with their own sense, their own glory. We will make our name great. But we already bear the image of God, which is why we should bear that reflection. So, also, I think it's just worth noting when we look at the Tower of Babel and the people are rebelling, of all the ways that God could have handled this situation, this is one of the things we miss. People think, we look at the Old Testament, oh, God's so angry. Going down and confusing their language and they disperse and the project is abandoned is actually rather merciful. Of all the things, look, God promised, he promised not to flood, but he didn't promise he wouldn't zap the thing with lightning 100,000 times, which he could have. He could have sent, hey, I want these guys to disperse. Plague will do that. Let's send some plague and they'll be running from each other. All the ways that God could have brought his wrath upon these people. And instead, he just changes their language so they disperse a little bit more naturally. Look at the kindness and the forgiveness of God as people thumb their nose at him and the way that he responds. And so the place was called Babel. This is why even today, we take that word and we talk about somebody babbling. The word itself in Hebrew means confusion, which is quite different from what God is going to establish very soon. The words are similar. Babel does sound similar to the word Bethel, which means the house of God that he's going to be establishing. And so they disperse. We go to verse 10. And this is why as we read, sometimes we feel like we read and all of a sudden we got this hard shift, but it's not. Follow what's happening here. Okay, I think this is one of the reasons Nick has been gone so much is because I get all the genealogies. I just want to point that out. Like I've had every genealogy so far for the last 3 weeks. Verse 10. These are the generations of Shem. But notice, I just told you, Shem means name. They were going to make a name for himself. So what do we get right next to the text? Here's the generation of the name. Shem was 100 years old, and he fathered Arp 2 years after the flood. And Shem lived after he fathered Arp 500 years and had other sons and daughters. When Arp had lived 35 years, he fathered Shelah. And Arp lived after he fathered Shelah 403 years. Notice the decline. And had other sons and daughters. When Shelah had lived 30 years, he fathered Eber. And Shelah lived after he fathered Eber 403 years and had other sons and daughters. When Eber lived 34 years, he fathered Peleg. And Eber lived after he fathered Peleg 430 years and had other sons and daughters. Peleg lived 30 years. He fathered Reu, and Peleg lived after he fathered Reu 209 years. Much shorter. Had other sons and daughters. Reu lived 32 years and fathered Serug. And Reu lived after he fathered Serug 207 years and had other sons and daughters. And Serug lived 30 years. He fathered Nahor. And Serug lived after he fathered Nahor 200 years and had other sons and daughters. When Nahor had lived 29 years, he fathered Terah. And Nahor lived after he fathered Terah 119 years and had other sons and daughters. When Terah had lived 70 years, he fathered Abram, Nahor, and Haran. So we see God's word come to fruition. He's like, I'm going to reduce their lifespan because they get into trouble. And we see this through the genealogy of Shem, the one whose name is name. When they said, we're going to make a name, we follow Shem all the way down to Abram. Verse 27. And now these are the generations of Terah. Terah fathered Abram, Nahor, and Haran. And Haran fathered Lot. And Haran died in the presence of his father Terah in the land of his kindred in Ur of the Chaldeans. And Abram and Nahor took wives. And the name of Abram's wife was Sarai. And the name of Nahor's wife, Milcah. And the daughter of Haran, the father of Milcah and Ishka. Now Sarai was barren, and she had no children. Terah took Abram his son, and Lot the son of Haran, his grandson, and Sarai his daughter-in-law, his son Abram's wife, and they went forth together from Ur of the Chaldeans to go into the land of Canaan. But when they came to Haran, they settled there. The days of Terah were 205 years, and Terah died in Haran. If you take this genealogy that they've given us of these guys who said they lived so long and they fathered someone and they fathered someone and they fathered someone, and you can fact check me, I've looked at it several times. Noah lives about 350 years after the flood. Abram is the firstborn of Terah. Noah was still alive when Abram was born. The numbers line up. Which is why, from Adam to Noah, there's only one person in between to link them. From Noah to Abram. In other words, how distant are the stories of the garden and the fall? 3 people from Abram. Now, God also has special revelation. He can always reveal. But in terms of how would Abram really know the God of his fathers, this is not thousands and thousands of genealogies and people. We have some very, very direct contact. And here we have, after the story of Babel, we feel like we shift. We feel like we leave it behind. But they wanted to make a name. We have this genealogy. And we have coming down to Abram, and we get this, and we have a sense. We're like, okay, this is Abraham. We're setting up for it. We got it. But because we stop at chapter breaks, I'm going to dip a little bit into chapter 12. First 2 verses. Now the Lord said to Abram, go from your country and your kindred and your father's house to the land I will show you. That's usually our focus. And I will make of you a great nation, and I will bless you, and I will make your name, your Shem, great, so that you will be a blessing. What starts with the Tower of Babel and people with their own overinflated sense of self-importance ends with God and his plan that he has in store a noble purpose. He has in store, he tells Abram, I will make your name great. The nations will be blessed. And Abraham is probably sitting back like, cool, what does that mean? What does that look like? Go into a land I will show you. And Abram's like, all right. It was a land that they were supposed to go to anyway. It was the land that when Moses was writing this, that the children of Israel had gotten right up to and balked because they were afraid of the giants in the land. And they said, we're going to go back to Egypt. And now they're looping the mountain, waiting to die, hearing that this is a part of God's noble purpose. This is a part of his plan to bless the nations, to make that name great. The story of Babel is the story of us and how we so frequently have that overinflated sense of self-importance. That my life is so important and so big, and it's not to say you're not unimportant. I mean, it's not to say that you're not important. Not to say that you don't matter. But again, we don't put ourselves in God's plan. We think that we, as what we see with social media, we believe ourselves to be the center of the universe. And this also is why when problems befall us, when things happen to us, we cry out in anger, as if God does not have the right to order the entire cosmos to his plan. And we see within Babel, we see people that have twisted what God has said, and he has a plan. He has in this story, his goal is to not just leave Earth 2.0 and leave it to its place. So we go all the way back to the garden, all the way back to great-great-grandmammy Eve, where she messed up, and she's dealing with it, and God says, listen, there's coming a day, and he's talking to her, and he's dealing with the snake. He said, her seed will come into the snake. You're going to bruise his heel, but he's going to crush your head. That's a plan that was from the beginning. All of this is in place. Sometimes we forget where we are in the story. This happens to us sometimes when we read books. You ever read the book and you're like, you're starting to read your book and you like have no idea what's going on? Like you get there and you're like, I've got characters, I don't know who they are. Okay, I read some really long books, and so sometimes, by the time like I'm around book 6, a couple 5,000 pages in, you get a little confused as to what's going on because there's a lot happening, and you kind of get stuck and like, where is this going? But from the beginning, God, in his omniscience, in his plan, in his foresight, has this in store that he is going to bring about the Messiah, the one who will do more than fix the world through a flood or fix it through fire. He is the one who will die for our sins to pay for that sin because God gives us a free gift. He takes us, the little creatures that have such an overinflated sense of self-importance, the ones who think that they can build a tower to heaven, the ones who think that they can, Jonah, run from God. God tells me to do something, well, I'm going to run away. Like, it's one of those, like, if you have any concept, any sense of who God is, how ridiculous that is. Or you have Job in his anger, in his pain, crying out, I want an audience before God. I want God to answer me. We have an overinflated sense of self-importance. And yet, at the same time, God gives each one of us the free gift of salvation, that by simply believing in Christ and receiving this gift, all sins that we have committed, past, present, and future, are paid for with the blood of Christ. The infinite value and the infinite gift we have been given. And yet, sometimes we get so caught up in our own story. And so our lives ought to be, because of this, again, we look at Babel, what do we learn? They wanted to make their name great. We, because we are made in the image of God, with this free gift of salvation, we should be letting our light shine. We should be the salt of the earth. We should be the billboards for Christ, and yet our lives are much more in the style of something from south of the border. Have you seen the south of the border signs? How awful they are? Decrepit, how old? I just came up 95 earlier, so this was part of my inspiration. Like, I'm looking at them. Man, these things have been there a long time. And then when you get to south of the border, I stopped there one time. I don't think I'm going to make that mistake again. I feel so bad. I took the South Africans there. Like, we stopped at south of the border with the South Africans. I'm like, I am so sorry. Please do not judge my country by this. I was like, what is this? And I'm like, because they hype it up all the way, like for like 100-something miles. South of the border, both ways. They can be up past Raleigh. It's like, oh, south of the border. And you get there and you're like, this is garbage. And there's this element, our lives, we should be proclaiming Christ. We say we love Jesus, but then when people take a look at us and they're like, this is all you've got? Our lives have a noble purpose of making the name of Jesus Christ great. And there is no greater noble purpose. So you know what I like about Owen Wilson, other than any movie he's not in? In the TV show Loki, Owen Wilson plays Mobius, and Mobius's great dream is to have a jet ski. So you've got Loki, who wants to be God of the universe, and you've got Mobius, who just wants a jet ski. He just wants a jet ski. Babel, Loki, Mobius, the church. Our priorities are disordered. So the question for you this week, what disorder plagues you? Do you have a twisted sense of noble purpose to make your name great among your family, your coworkers, your community? I was hanging out with some guys this weekend and down in Charleston, and they live in the suburban community where it's, you know, they go around with a ruler and check your grass, and everybody has to like put on the big show, and you try to make it. And I'm listening to all this, and I'm like, such disorder. Such disorder. Not to say it's not nice to have a nice manicured lawn. It's nice. But goodness, we get so disordered. So the question, we look at Babel. Babel was disordered. They were disordered in their priorities. So what does God do? He's like, I'll give you disorder. Messes up their languages, so they disperse. We see God setting up. We see the result of disorder. The truest result of disorder is from verse 10 to 26, where you see these people living so long and their lives are getting cut short, and that you've got great-great-great-grandfathers watching their descendants die of old age with them because humanity's life is being cut short by a good 80% of what it was. If we only live 120 years and we live close to 1,000, God nearly cuts our lifespan short by 90% because we're so disordered. What disorder plagues you? What stubbornness is in your heart? What view of yourself do you have in relation to the greatness of God? Because until we recognize the greatness of the God who reigns and our place with him, we will commit the same mistakes. It's going to be the same thing, because this is what we see. They did not give God credit, so in Earth 2.0, they mess up. We look at Abram, and we're going to look at his life, and he does not listen. He does not give credit to God, and he's going to mess up, and he's going to mess up, and he's going to mess up. All through the rest of Abraham's story until just about the very end. Because we look, and we always talk about Abram, God says, hey, go to this land, and Abraham packs up and he goes to the land, right? Wrong. He, like most guys, misses his turn by 250 miles and he goes to Egypt because he needed snacks. There was famine in the land, so he went to Egypt because that's where the food was. We're going to see the result, the book of Genesis more than anything, the disorder of humanity and God's constant call back to his plan, his order, and that's the call for you in your life this morning. He has given you the gift of salvation. He has directed your soul to the eternity with him, where everything will be made new. So for right now, what disorder plagues your soul, your life, that you need, like the Tower of Babel, to abandon and return to the Lord who has called you to great things? Pray with me. Father, we thank you for this morning as we're reminded, it's stories that seem like something out of a fiction novel, to build a tower so high with bricks. We look at it and we wonder, what were they thinking? And then I look around. We look around in our world today. What is everybody thinking? But Father, help us this week, help us today to take a look in that mirror and ask that reflection, what are you thinking? Help us to return to the plan, to the design. Help us return to you in making your name great. In Jesus'